Hey folks, Zach here with World of Game Design. Today I'm going to start a small series where I go over the various forms of conflict you'll find in 2D20 Dune. There are 5 forms of conflict in total, and though they share a similar rule set, it's really in the nuanced differences that each one has a chance to shine. As a reminder, we've already gave a full overview of the game in our How to Play video a couple months ago. Also, this is not meant to be an alternative to reading the rulebook. There are plenty of nuanced notes that I won't be able to cover in a short video. Please keep in mind that this is my interpretation of the rules, and your interpretation may and probably will vary in some respects. Today's video is going to revolve around the skirmish form of conflict. Let's get to it. Skirmishes are defined as combat in close range with a handful of combatants. As with our How to Play video, we're going to break this down in a few different sections. First, let's talk about the flow of combat, or initiative. Every round, the party and their opponents take turns acting, with one action being taken per turn. First, a member of the party goes, it doesn't matter which one, and then the GM selects an enemy to go. Then another party member goes, then another enemy, and so on until all characters have gone this round. If there's a higher number of characters on one side than another, then the larger side will likely get a few turns in a row at the end of the round. You can also spend 2 points of momentum or threat to keep the initiative and have a character or an ally immediately make a turn. Next, let's set the board with our zones and chat movement. Zones in a skirmish are distinctly different areas of an environment. They are the board. In this example, the lower market is a zone, the bridge is a zone, and the upper walkways are each a zone. Moving from one zone to another costs your turn, and you can spend 2 points of momentum to move through an additional zone if you like. On most turns, you'll probably want to try and either move boldly or subtly, and in order to do so, you'll need to succeed on a difficulty level 2 move test. If you fail, you still move, but your opponent gets an immediate move for free. Keep in mind, moving can be its own action, but moving boldly or moving subtly are also actions, and naming which one before you roll is important to your DM or your GM accurately adjudicating how that should go down. A successful moving subtly test means that you can immediately carry out an action in the new zone. This is great for getting into position and then making your attack and similar maneuvers. A successful moving boldly test means that you can also immediately move an enemy asset from one zone to another. You have successfully drawn their attention where you wanted. This is great for gaining control of a zone or getting an enemy asset completely out of a powerful position. Okay, so now we know how to move, but what are we moving? Let's talk assets. In a skirmish, it's good to think of characters as the assets. You can't really move a shield or a knife without also moving the character. So you could think of items then as sub-assets in a skirmish. They can be assumed to be tied to a character unless somebody does something that targets them specifically. Other than characters, other types of assets in a skirmish are aiming a ranged weapon in particular. Typically, shooting at someone in a different zone requires a +1 increase in difficulty. But if you aim a ranged weapon, you can move that aim to a different zone, move that asset to a different zone, and negate the difficulty increase. Now, keep in mind, moving your aim to a zone costs your turn. Moving it boldly or moving it subtly allows you to do more. A lot of people would move their aim subtly, and then if they succeed on that move test, then they can then take an action to actually attack with that aim improvement. It's a bit weird, but just go with it. It produces some interesting scenarios and isn't that difficult once you've ran it through once or twice. Additionally, you can get intangible assets from things like taking cover or using other tactics. These adjust the difficulty level of your tests at a rate of plus or minus 1 per asset utilized. Taking cover might reduce the difficulty level of your battle test by 1, while being flanked might actually increase the level of difficulty by 1 or more. This is probably a good time to talk about my own house rule. The by-the-book way of doing a single attack in a skirmish, or any conflict, is that you and your opponent would square off in a contested battle test. each of you rolling your own battle skill roll. If the attacker wins, they deal damage. If they fail, nothing happens. I don't really care for contested rolls between PCs and NPCs though. They just slow the game down, and you get the same result by just setting the difficulty level of the test based upon the skill level of the NPC. Let me give you a couple of examples. It's really, really easy and makes the game run a whole lot smoother. Let's say you're attacking an Arakeen native, not a Fremen, just a native. That attack is going to take a battle test with a difficulty level of 1. Let's say you're defending against an assassin. That's going to be difficulty level 3, but maybe it's only a difficulty level 2 when it comes to attacks that you make against them. It's easier to attack an assassin, but they're really good at hitting you back. What if you're fighting like a powerful Fremen warrior like Stilgar? Maybe that's difficulty level 4 for both your attacks and your defense. I don't know. It's a whole lot simpler to do that, though, than to this kind of, we all roll every single time, and then we compare notes. Like, why? Just set a difficulty level and have your players roll. All right, so let's talk about how you can defeat an opponent. That's kind of the last piece of this puzzle. If you successfully make an attack against an opponent and it's a minor character, they're just immediately defeated. Simple as that. If it's a more important character or a player character, then you're trying to burn down their battle skill. This is called an extended test. Each successful attack scores 2 points against the character's battle skill total. Once they've accumulated a number of points that meets their battle value, they are defeated. Using a better quality asset in your attack or spending a couple points of momentum allows you to score an additional point value against the target. As a side note, important characters and player characters can resist defeat once per scene, staying in the conflict when they would have otherwise fallen, but they'll need to spend a point of momentum or give a point of threat to do so. So, let's run a quick example here. At the start of combat, the PCs are taking fire from several angles. PC Aaron isn't a fighter, doesn't have a ranged weapon, and wants to stay alive, so he'll decide to spend his turn evaluating his surroundings in an attempt to gain an intangible asset of heavy cover. The GM rules that he'll need to succeed on a difficulty level 2 discipline test to keep himself together and sprint for a spot of cover within the zone. He rolls, let's say he succeeds, and is now harder to hit, represented by reducing the difficulty level of battle tests by 1. That's the end of Aaron's turn, but the party has some momentum in reserve and opts to use a couple points here to keep the initiative and let his bodyguard, Karis, act immediately. Karis has a sword and assaults the nearest assassin in the same zone, requiring a difficulty level 2 battle test. He succeeds, and because this is a standard mook, he defeats the assassin outright. Now it's both of the assassins up above's turns, that's a lot of S's, and they have ranged weapons. The first one lets off a scattering of shots, and Karis needs to make a difficulty level 3 battle test. Now, because the assassin didn't attempt to move their aim asset and do a subtle shot, which might have cost them their turn, Karis' test difficulty is immediately reduced by 1 down to 2. He succeeds, and the shot goes wide. The other assassin decides to move their aim asset subtly into the lower zone and is required to make that level 2 difficulty move test. They succeed and can now target Aaron without the range penalty. That said, Aaron is still under cover, so the difficulty level is again reduced by 1 to a difficulty of 2. Aaron still fails, however, so the assassin hits, dealing 2 points of damage against Aaron's battle skill, and the GM burns 2 points of threat to deal an additional point of damage, knocking Aaron out of the fight with a precise hit. Brutal. Aaron chooses to resist defeat and stays up instead, clinging to consciousness by handing over a point of threat. That's the end of the first round, and now it's back to the players' turns. Karis decides to act for the first this time, and he's desperate. He decides to move boldly into the upper areas, and succeeds in his move test to do so. He chooses to draw an opponent's asset, the other assassin's aim, into the same zone, thus safeguarding Aaron. He then spends 2 points of momentum to keep the initiative and attacks the nearby assassin, succeeding on his difficulty level 2 battle test and dropping him. Only one assassin remains, and his aim is now drawn away from his quarry and towards the bodyguard. Sensing that things are not going to go his way, he chooses to withdraw and live to fight another day. How about we do another example, this time with a bit more detail? Alright, this time the party starts with 2 assassins and 2 hounds in the lower streets with them. The party starts with Karis rushing forward and making a difficulty level 2 battle test against a hound. Let's get fancy here and say that Karis notes that he has a trait called Brutal. He will give no quarter to these creatures and isn't afraid to cause a scene here in the market. The GM likes that idea and agrees that the trait can be used. Using a trait brings the difficulty down by 1 to 1. Karis also notes that he has a focus and dirty fighting for his battle tests, and so he describes kicking out a spray of dust with his boot into the eyes of the hound as he makes his assault. This allows him to crit on a 7 instead of a 1. He succeeds, kills the dog, and also gains 2 points of momentum for his additional successes. He immediately uses those 2 points of momentum to keep the initiative and attacks an assassin. The GM rules that he's already received a benefit for his Brutal trait this round, but he also has the Driven trait, and the player suggests that by spending the points of momentum to keep the initiative, he was displaying this Driven trait. The GM agrees, and the difficulty level of the test is again reduced from 2 down to 1. Karis succeeds again, barely, and fells an assassin. Now it's the enemy's turn. The assassin chooses to go and moves past the bodyguard to assault the Mentat, Cadmus. Cadmus must succeed on a difficulty level 3 battle test and has no focuses in battle, nor any traits that will help him. He rolls but fails and receives 2 points of damage against his battle skill. 2 more until he's down. The DM also chooses to keep the initiative and follows up that attack with another. Cadmus puts up a valiant effort but is unable to reach that lofty objective. He falls but chooses to spend a point of momentum to stay on his feet. He is resisting defeat here. That was the last point of momentum, however. Now it's the Mentat's turn, and he assaults the assassin, turning over a point of threat in order to get a 3rd die. He succeeds and drops the combatant. The Hound goes next and attacks the Mentat, requiring a difficulty level 2 battle test. The Mentat fails yet again, and is unable to use the resist defeat for a 2nd time in the scene. He falls. Top of the round again, and the bodyguard makes quick work of the last Hound with a swift difficulty level 2 battle test. The fight is over, and the GM rules that as long as the Mentat receives medical attention soon, he will make a full recovery. Alright, that's the video, folks. I'm going to work on a few other videos covering at least a couple more types of conflict, but hopefully this gives you some idea of how they should work. If you haven't yet, I'd encourage you to check out my Enhancing Espionages video, which throws more of my homebrew ideas for how to make this section of the game feel more like managing a house, and all the stressful decision making that comes with it. I'd also recommend checking out my How to Play video if you haven't already. If you like this video, consider subscribing to our channel. We have a lot of great content and different playlists, all centered around getting you into more RPGs and making those games better. We also make our very own RPG content, and there's a little bit of everything for folks to enjoy. I love all sorts of systems and like to dabble in designing a little bit for each one. You can check all that out at www.wogd.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.